All right, so this is Jeff from Grace and Peace. I'm the guitar player, and I just wanted to talk about Strat pickups and just sort of maybe help you guys sort of demystify some of the stuff that's out there. Now, I'm going to specifically only talk about Fender pickups because that is what I have the most. I have the most experience with Fender pickups. And so we're going to talk about really 5 sets of pickups and sort of what they're, how they sound. And I'm not going to do what a lot of guys do, which is they are going to make videos where there's sound demos, and I will tell you why. I have a ton of experience with that, and for a long time I would listen to sound demos and I would trust what the sound demos said, and then I would buy stuff and then not be happy with the results. And so here's what I ran into. So I've been building Strats since I was a young kid. So I had a lot of experience with sort of what to buy and whatever with a lot of different types of things. However, recently in the last, like, say 10 years, I built 3 Strats where I spent, like a good amount of money on all of the parts. And I went through a whole gamut of different pickups to try to figure out what I liked. And so I'm hoping that, and these guitars are all pretty much exactly the same aside from the pickups. They're very similar. They're all made from the same parts. So I have 3 Strats that I built that have they have MJT bodies. 2 of them are swamp ash, and then 1 of them is pine. Now, I wasn't like looking for a pine Strat, but there was one that happened to be inexpensive on eBay, so I just kind of jumped on it. So I have one that's pine. And to be honest, the tone differences between the 2 different tone woods is it's pretty nominal. If anything, maybe the pine is slightly brighter than the swamp ash, but swamp ash is really bright anyways. And so those 3 guitars are very similar. They all have the same, Fender vintage bridge. They have Fender vintage Cluson tuners, and they have all parts, fat chunky necks on them, which would be like a 55 profile. They're 9.5-inch radius with 6105 frets. It's a pretty hard fret material too. They're like high-end guitars, and I'll tell you what, I went through a lot when I bought these guitars to try to get the pickups exactly right and which ones worked and for different things. So I'm going to go through the different types of pickups that I put in these guitars, and then we'll talk about the differences and sort of what to expect when you get these pickups and what they work for and what they don't work for based on what you have. And so we'll just go from there. So some of the things I'll talk about too in this video are going to be one thing to keep in mind is that anytime that you are watching any kind of video, first off, manufacturers, and again, I don't work for Fender. I wouldn't turn down a job with them, but I don't work for them. I'm just trying to help you figure out what pickups are going to work for your guitar and what you're trying to do. Because you have to remember that every single thing that you get as far as a piece of music equipment is just a paintbrush. It's literally just something you're using as a tool to make music. So sometimes getting overly caught up in like the idea of like, well, I gotta have this because this is what this person used. I promise you, okay, so I was a guitar tech for a while, and I worked for like major label bands, and I've run a music store for 15 years. A lot of what people have is because that is what they could get at the time, and that's why they just liked the way it sounded and they made it work. Like Kurt Cobain, I promise you, used the chorus pedal that he used, that Electro Harmonix chorus pedal, probably because it was the one he could buy. And he just made it work. So there's some level of like not worrying so much, but this is more for I know who you are, you finicky Strat guys. I know, because I'm exactly like that too, where like if it's not exactly right, it isn't going to work, and then you kind of freak out and go down a huge rabbit hole of what do you get, and it's like, yeah, it's like anxiety that's involved in the whole thing. I've been through it for a long time, so I get it. I go through it with overdrive pedals all the time, where like I'll have a drive pedal that I'm really happy with, and then suddenly one day I'm not happy with it, and I have to find something else, and I can't find the sound I'm trying to get, and all of it. It's really just like insanity. But so the first set of pickups I want to talk about is Texas Specials, and I want to talk about the sort of the history of that pickup and what that pickup is made to do and what I think it's good for. Okay, so a Texas Special is not a traditional Strat pickup. It is more similar to like a Seymour Duncan quarter pounder pickup than it is like a traditional Strat pickup. It's more of a traditional Strat pickup than a quarter pounder, but it's a high output. It is more similar in output to a like low output Gibson pickup than it is to a like Strat pickup. Now, what's great about that is if you're a guy and you say you're like in a cover band, or you're just in a band where you play a Les Paul sometimes and you play a Strat sometimes, a Texas Special is really a good option for you because it's a good strong pickup. And one of the worst things that you run into with amplifiers, especially if you're not a person who traditionally plays like Fender amplifiers where they have the two inputs, is that massive drop down that you get. So say you go to the show and you take a Les Paul for certain things, and then now you pull out a Strat and you plug it in and it's like half the gain and the EQ is terrible, right? So then you got to go back and re-EQ your amp, or you have to have like drive pedals that are specifically for your Strat, and that's just adding stuff to your board so that you can play certain songs that are Strat songs. Having a Strat with Texas Specials is like a good way to sort of just get yourself something that's kind of in the neighborhood already, and that's going to give you like a good strong amount of output. Now, it is voiced more like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and actually that was the point of that pickup. The guy who made that pickup, there's interviews out there that exist where he talks about sort of the point of that pickup was they wanted to, it is not necessarily meant to be a recreation of Stevie's pickups. Actually, a pickup that's more similar to that would be like the 5762s, which we won't dig super deep into because I've never really owned those. I've played them in guitars. Again, I've run a music store for 15 years, so I've pretty much played everything. Not everything, but a lot of things. I mean, if you can think of like the amount of used pieces that have come in over the years that I've played, it's a lot. So I've experienced a lot of different types of things. So I'll tell you, with that set of pickups, what their whole purpose was, again, if you have so their whole point was they wanted to make a pickup that sounded like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but that without all of the things that Stevie was doing that are unconventional. First things first, Stevie picked super hard, and he was also playing really big strings with really high action through like Dumble amps. And so like they were trying to recreate his sound, the average guy with a normal set of strings could get like that sort of big, like burly Stevie tone through just like a normal guitar. So like you could buy, you could get your Strat that was just an American Standard Strat with like 9s or 10s on it, and it would sound like it had 13s on it, and had super jacked action, and was like you were picking really hard. So that was the whole point of that pickup. Things about that pickup that are sort of characteristic to that pickup, it is very much a pickup that, because those are kind of, I think that they made some sort of what I would consider to be errors. I also think that pickup is maybe more based on a 63 pickup era pickup than it is on like a 58, which is what people are saying now was probably in his guitar. There's also sort of like some back and forth. I also know that like his techs and stuff, if a pickup was bad, they would just rewind it. They didn't give a crap. I mean, he was playing all the time, so like Who knows? But I will say that it has a lot of characteristics of 60s pickups, of early 60s pickups, which is sort of something we'll talk about later on when we talk about the Fat 50s and the Fat 60s pickups and sort of the differences between those two. And then there's another set called the 54s. I'll say this too, they have a sort of, they have some of that smoky low end, which if you've ever played like a real 62 Strat or a real 63 Strat, there's something really magical about the neck pickup and the low end that you get from the neck pickup that is almost kind of jazzy sounding, and it's something that is just real characteristic of that particular era of pickup. It has a little bit of that, however, through overwinding and some of the changes that they did with that pickup, you get a little more of a compressed low end from that pickup than you do, say, from like a Fat 60s. I will say also, if you like the sound of a Texas Special, but you don't want something so hot and so compressed sounding, a Fat 60s is really similar to that same pickup, but without all of the extra windings. It still has additional low end, but it's not as high output. If you want something that's in that neighborhood that has neither of those things, that doesn't have the low end that you have with a Texas Special, or that has, say, like doesn't have the low end and doesn't have the output, the 5762 set is more similar to, it's sort of like, it still has that mid-range. It doesn't have as much of that smoky low end thing at all. It's more of like a straightforward Strat pickups, like middle of the road. I would say that the 5762s, and I know there were people who disagree with me, but I've played them sort of side by side. I've never owned a guitar with that pickup set in it, but I've played them side by side. The closest thing to the 5762s is the Tex-Mex pickups are very similar to the 5762s. But like I said, bottom line, if you like Texas, you're thinking about getting Texas Specials, the benefits are lots of output, so it's good. Now, something to remember with that pickup too is when you drive it, it does do a little bit of like, there is a little bit of compression there, that's sort of additional to that pickup. But again, great if you have multiple guitars and you play sometimes, a humbucker guitar and sometimes a single coil guitar, or maybe if you just want a single coil that's just beefier sounding, that isn't so thin, you want more output, maybe you play a lot of rock stuff, and you want to play, through like a Marshall or something, and you're trying to get like some classic rock tones and stuff like that. Can you play metal? I mean, you could. There's a lot of guitars that would be more suited to do that, but like this is more for the Strat guys who are kind of in that blues or classic rock or like 70s rock stuff, garage rock. It's a pickup that works great for a lot of those types of things and can be very versatile and gives you extra tone, like extra output. Now, some things to know about that pickup. Again, because of the additional low end that you get, and we'll talk about the difference with certain amps, right? So the amp is in a lot of ways everything, and I would really pick, when I'm going to pick pickups, I'm going to pick pickups based on the amp that I use more so than anything, because say if I'm a guy who plays through like a Vox, or I play through a like a Silverface Fender, or like a modern reissue Fender, or like say like Hot Rod series amps, you have to know, or like the Blues Deluxe, right? Something like that, or like a Marshall. The Marshall stuff tends to be more forgiving, especially like modern Marshall stuff, because there's a lot of preamp there. But as far as like if you're trying to get your clean tones and stuff to be really, really clean, Texas Specials probably have to roll it off because it's going to sound really pushed through a lot of amps. And through the Hot Rods and Blues stuff, without it rolled off a little bit. A lot of times it's really punchy. This is because the Hot Rod and Blues series amps have the tone stack that's more similar to a Bassman than like a Silverface or like a reissue. And you might find sometimes through like reissue amps that the upper mids are pretty punchy too. But again, a pickup that's very good for a lot of things. Okay, so let's talk about the Fat 50s pickups. Okay, so these, and we'll compare them to a couple other sets that exist. Well, one other set. Okay, so these are meant to sound, these were kind of aimed at like the John Frusciante characters of the world. Like they kind of have more of that kind of sound. However, they're sort of supposed to be based on like 50s pickups, but I would consider them to be more like a 55, 56 pickup. And I will tell you that comparatively to the 54 pickups, which we don't really talk about, I do own a set of those. I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends. Again, this is another one of those times where it depends on the amp that you use. I did not like those pickups at all. I felt like they were way too bright. Now, if you're a guy that like, you're trying to get like old school, like, Albert Collins or like old Buddy Guy stuff, or guys like that where they were just really just blowing the treble out all the time, then that's probably a good set, even though they're still kind of thin. The Fat 50s pickup is sort of based on that, but has additional low end and is a little bit higher output. It's a pickup that I would say so like I have a set in my green guitar. I like the way that those pickups sound for certain things. Certain things I don't, I like the bridge pickup in that guitar a lot. So I'll tell you that I played the green guitar. It was my main guitar for most of the time, for the last maybe 6 years. And then recently when I had pickups kind of swapped around, I put Fat 60s in the blue guitar, and that has been the guitar that I play most of the time. The Fat 50s, the neck pickup does not have as much low end as the Fat 60s. It doesn't do that kind of smoky low end thing. It's more of a traditional like sort of Strat, single coil neck pickup sound that you're sort of used to, which is really good. I think that oftentimes when I go to the neck pickup on the blue guitar, unless I'm playing, because I play, if you check out our band or whatever, or my band, you'll kind of see what I mean. But I play both, like kind of old school blues. There's some R&B and funk elements in what we do, but then I also play like some sort of more, it's more like neo soul jazz kind of stuff. And for the neo soul jazz stuff, the neck pickup through cleans, or if you want to do like a John Mayer kind of thing, the Fat 60s are great. The Fat 50s are more forgiving and have less low end. So certain times, like when you flip to that neck pickup, especially with like gain, the Fat 50s pickup is maybe sometimes a little more usable. It's not quite as muddy as it is on the Fat 60s. The middle pickup is very good as well. If you're a guy that plays a lot of like, Hendrixy stuff, or if you do like Clapton stuff and you want to use that sort of quacky, sort of middle of the road, like that middle and bridge pickup, that's a good pickup set for that. Again, a little more like low end than like say like the 54 set is like rip your head off bright. And again, I think that, sometimes when I play these, because I've played a lot of vintage guitars too, and when I play vintage guitars, I think the Fat series pickups sort of more capture what those pickups probably sound like now versus like what they sounded like when they were new, and the 54 set sounds like probably like a 54 Strat sounded when it was off the shelf, and like, you know, again, rip your head off bright because the pickups had no time to settle down at all, you know, so they were just completely super bright. And you know, they were made to work through, you got to remember the kind of music they were trying to play, you know what I mean? It was like Buddy Holly and a bunch of country guys playing through like tweed amps, you know what I mean? They were still kind of figuring everything out. And so the idea of like what we play now was not really what those pickups were for. So the Fat 50s are giving you a good sort of approximation of those different types of tones. Like I said, more forgiving through amps that are brighter amps. There is something in the mid-range, sometimes like a mid-low thing, that I don't necessarily care for. I feel like the Fat 60s oftentimes in the bridge position can be more forgiving. Again, all just depends on what you're doing. But that's a good, you know, so if I'm a guy, I play a lot of like, you know, kind of funky stuff, or I play a lot of, you know, blues, and I don't want as much low end as you would get from like the Fat 60s, and I want something that's, you know, sort of more versatile. That's a good pickup set to have too. Like I said, I have 3 guitars. One of them has Fat 50s, one has Fat 60s, and then I have a guitar that has 69 pickups in it. And again, I would say another thing with that, Fat 50s are good, a really good combo for if you play through, like, say, like a reissue Fender amplifier, or if you play through a like a Silverface or something like that. Good for those amplifiers. Again, sometimes you wish they had a little more output, but that's just, you know, the nature of that pickup. Okay, so let's talk about the Fat 60s. Again, meant to be more like an early 60s set. So I will tell you how I ended up with Fat 60s is I had played a 62 Strat, a real vintage one. There's a video floating around somewhere on YouTube of me playing that guitar, and I was just like over the moon on that guitar. I just loved the way that the neck pickup in specific sounded on that guitar. So then I was sort of searching forever after that to try to capture something at least in the neighborhood of that particular tone, and I think the Fat 60s are kind of the most similar to that. And what I mean by that is that like smoky low end with like overtones and stuff like that. The Fat 60s don't do that exactly, but very good pickup, very good pickup set. I feel like, again, for if you're going to play with like higher gain, a lot of the time the Fat 60s set is very good and very forgiving when you know, put it into the bridge position. It kind of maintains some of that low end that you want. A lot of times, you know, Fender Strats, you put them in the bridge pickup and it's just like way too bright for everything. Fat 60s are not like that. The middle pickup is very good too. Very like sort of quacky and sounds really cool. I would put it, again, you know, what do I think that they sound like? In a lot of ways, 5762s with like a jacket, you know what I mean? The extra low end, more vintagey sounding, but with a little bit more output. Not as much output as the Texas Specials, but I would say, and voiced kind of similarly to the Texas Specials. I have heard people say that the Fat 60s are the Big Dipper pickups in disguise, that they're basically the John Mayer pickup. I would say that's pretty close. So I play a lot of like jazzy sounding stuff, jazzy blues kind of stuff too. And to me, that pickup in the neck position through the right amplifier is awesome. I mean, it's like you can get, especially with it rolled off, like you roll the neck pickup down, you can play like Wes Montgomery type jazz on a Strat with that pickup. you know what I mean, in the neck position. So very cool, very usable for so many different types of things. Again, the blue guitar, when I made this most recent record, I used it almost, I think I only didn't use it on one song. I think I used it on every other song, because everything that even because I used a lot of different amp models and stuff too, just because it was part of this project, is kind of what I was trying to do. Even with amp models, I just felt it was like noticeably better sounding for what I was doing. And I did, just to kind of, because I thought, well, I want to try some different stuff, you know what I mean? Because I don't want everything to sound exactly the same. I just felt like most times when I plugged in one of the other guitars, I wasn't as happy with the sounds I got. I will say that the next set of pickups we're going to talk about, which is the 69 pickups, that set of pickups for certain things is actually probably more usable through my amplifier. It just depends on what I'm doing. But Fat 60s have been my favorite set, but I will caution you that they do have a tremendous amount of low end. And the neck pickup, if you're not that kind of player, like if you're a guy who just like loves a traditional Strat neck pickup sound, you might hate these pickups. Now, through certain amplifiers, it might not matter. I will say I have plugged my Strat in. Now, my Strats are weird. They have huge necks. So a 55 profile is 1 inch no taper. So that means that it is like a baseball bat, like the size of like a SG neck is they're a no-caster neck, basically. It's a 55 Strat neck. So you always get like additional low end from that anyways. And so my blue guitar is like the beefiest sounding Strat that you're gonna ever make, for that reason. So again, you have to kind of keep that in mind too. However, so there might be some people who hate the way these sounds, and I will tell you that I have plugged that guitar into some Fender amplifiers where I felt like it overpowered the low end of the amp, to where so I plugged it into some reissue amps when I was running my store, just to see, and there were some times where I felt like that guitar was just too much low end for that amplifier. Now, I didn't, you could dial it out, but it was definitely something where you were going to set the bass like a lot lower than maybe you traditionally would. All right, so let's talk about the 69 pickups. So the 69 pickups are modeled after, when they say 69 pickups, they really should say 65 pickups. They are modeled after the old school gray bottom 65 pickups. So 65 to about 69 was, the era, actually maybe a little after that, maybe 73. I'm sure there's guys in the comments that are like, nah, idiot. It's 74, even, you probably had gray bottoms. Anyways, maybe even to 78, I don't know. I can tell you this, these pickups sound more like that. That is what they're modeled after. They're made to be sort of more like Jimmy's pickups, and they are, that pickup set has a low end roll off. We'll just put it that way. It has a low end roll off that is characteristic to those pickups. So the 62 pickups, that sort of sweet spot of 62, 63, 64 is the first year of the gray bottoms, really. And then before that, they were doing, you had the different version of the what they call the black bottom pickups. The earliest versions of the black bottom pickups would have been 54 through about 56. That's your sort of early sounds. That's what you would expect from, say, 70s Clapton. That's that set of pickups. So if you want that sound, that's a 54 set. We talked about that set a little bit earlier. That set was way, way too bright for me. The thing I'll say about the 69 pickups, one of the great things about that set is if you are playing through amps that have a lot of low end, that pickup set I think is really kind of the best match for an amp with a lot of low end. So if you play through a Bassman, or you play through a, and we talked about earlier, like the Blues Deluxe and the Hot Rod Deluxe, they both have a tone stack that's more similar to a Bassman than they do the tone stack of a Twin or a Deluxe. So they're just beefier sounding right out of the gate. If you play through a Super Reverb, right, again, or if you play through any of those 68 custom amps, you probably would love the 69 pickups because they have that low end roll off, which I don't know about you guys, but like every time I buy an amplifier, when I plug it in and I play through it, I'm automatically drawn to the amps that have the Bassman tone stack. I think they sound great. And especially when I'm like checking out amps and I'm trying to figure out something to buy, I'm always drawn towards that. However, a lot of times when I get them in a situation where I'm playing with other people, I'm like, man, this low end thing is kind of like too much low end. And it becomes like hard sometimes to like, I have to compromise my mix a lot of the time, or I'm just kind of like, man, why is this like, I feel like I lose some clarity when I'm playing through those amplifiers, even though I love the way that they sound. It's especially bad when you have two guitars, especially if you have two guitars and like maybe you have two guys that play Fenders. Like if it's a guy that's playing, say, like a Marshall or something, it's easier to achieve. But I often find like in situations like that, I end up having to put my bass like on like two on, because I have a Blues Deluxe, and that's like kind of my main amp that I use for like most things. Like if I was going to go jam with somebody, that's the amp I'm going to take with me. 40 watts 112 is like, I think in a lot of situations perfect for me. But I end up putting like the bass like on two a lot of the time, or taking like almost all of the bass out and then cranking the presence, and then actually probably calming down the mids a bunch too, to try to get something that's like sounds more like it works in a mix, is often what I do with those amplifiers. And I think that the 69 pickups, when I plug that guitar in, which I don't use that, I should probably use it more. That guitar, I will say in specific, a couple years ago, I decided I was like going crazy, and I really wanted to put a Gibson humbucker in a Strat, and I'll do a video where I show that guitar. But that guitar has a 57 Classic in the bridge, which it's very cool, and for a lot of things it's very fun. Like if you're playing like, you know, like 70s rock, I mean, it's that guitar. It doesn't sound like a Les Paul, but it'll pull off an SG sound pretty well because it's a 57 Classic. I mean, it's a legit, and I had to modify it. Like my tech that did it, we had to, because like a 57 Classic is like the pull piece, or the set screws, and like the whole thing is like too tall, so we had to like cut down the tab where the set screws go, and then like reduce it down, and then drill it out and tap it so that we could put that pickup in there. So it's like it's in there. I don't know. It's one of those things where like it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was really stoked about it. I actually really think it's cool. I don't know why, but I'm like such a purist Strat guy. If that guitar had 3 single coils in it, I would probably use it all the time. But because it doesn't, and it has a humbucker that I put in it because I thought that was a good idea, I don't use it that much. But I will tell you that that guitar, when I plug it in, the neck pickup in specific through my Blues Deluxe is so good, because it doesn't have a ton of low end. And I mean, like I said, Blues Deluxe, Hot Rod Deluxe, it's a Bassman tone stack. So if you're playing through a Bassman head, or you're playing through, especially if you're a guy that uses your neck pickup a lot, because there's a lot of different types of Strat guys. I, most times, unless I'm playing jazz, or unless I'm playing specifically something that's clean, that was meant, you know what I mean? So if I say I'm playing a song like Wind Cries Mary, right? A song like that, that's very clean. Then I might use the neck pickup. But pretty much most of the rest of the time, I'm going to play with some amount of gain, and I'm going to stay on the bridge pickup like 90% of the time. I might flip to the middle position if I'm going to do something weird, or if I'm playing Clapton stuff, you know, from the 70s, I'm going to do that bridge middle thing. Like if I want to play like Cocaine or something like that, I'm going to do that bridge middle thing, that kind of quacky thing. But most times I'm going to stay on the bridge pickup. Now, guys like John Frusciante, he's on the neck pickup like most of the time. Even when he's playing high gain, he's on the neck pickup. And so if I were a guy that's that guy, I would probably recommend like the 69 pickups, depending on what amplifier you're playing through, or like Fat 50s, because that's more of a traditional neck pickup sound. For me, I'm using the neck pickup for like almost like jazz. And I would say if you're a guy that's like, maybe you're a big time Mike McCready fan, probably the Fat 60s are going to be more up your alley, because while he does use the neck, he only uses it when he's going to play something really clean, and the rest of the time he's pretty much on the bridge. Okay, so that's your 69 pickups. Like I said, if you play through like a deluxe, or you play through like a Princeton or something like that, like a non-tweed, or we're talking like maybe a tweed too, or you're talking about like a twin or something, 69 pickups might be kind of bright for you. But if you're a guy that plays through something with a basement tone stack from like this, you know, like the 68 Silverface stuff that they are making right now that has the basement tone stack in it, or if you're playing through a Bassman head or like a Bassman 410 combo, just something that has a lot of low end 69 pickups, and you want something that's going to cut, those are good, because they trim off some of that. There's like a low end shelf, and it's probably helpful for certain situations. Okay, the last pickup set we'll talk about is the Tex-Mex, and I will tell you this is a super good middle of the road pickup. Like, I don't have a lot of things to say about it. They just sound like traditional Strat pickups, and they don't have a ton of character. They're in some ways, I would say, very, very similar to the way that the American Standard Strat pickups sounded before they started to screw around with them a whole bunch. Now, when I play like a, you know what, it's not an American Standard anymore, they call it like an American Professional, and then those guitars. When I play those guitars now, they are very dependent on the amp that you plug into them. Some amplifiers I really, really like the way they sound. Some amps I'm not as super wild about them. It all depends. But the Tex-Mex are very similar to, I would say, like a 2006, 2007 American Standard Strat, before they moved to putting Fat 50s in all of them, which was a great era. That era of Fender Strats where they put the Fat 50s in them, that's probably some of my favorite eras of American Standard Strats. But before that, they just had American Standard pickups in them, and those pickups were, a lot of guys took them out. And actually, you'll find a ton of American Standard Strats that people put Texas Specials in, which we talked about Texas Specials and how there's definitely some benefits to that. However, those pickups were really good. Like, they were, again, they were not like, oh my God, they do this thing, or oh my God, there's so much like this. No, they're just like really straightforward Strat pickups. And if you just really want like a good, you know, like if you have like a, say you have a Player Series Strat and you just want to upgrade to something that's more clear, you know, Tex-Mex are great. I will say there is also a video that's circulating where I have a 78 Strat that came into the store, and oh man, that's a whole nother story. But a guy bought a 78 Strat or had a 78 Strat that he had for a long time, and at some point decided that he wanted to put hot rails in it. And so he put a hot rails in the middle position in this 78 Strat that was real cool and had been pretty much previously unmodified. And so when we got it in, I was like, I can't leave this. This is like terrible. Like, this thing will never sell with this stupid hot rail. We put a Tex-Mex in the middle, and there's a video somewhere that's of me playing that guitar. And I actually, like, one of the things I'll say is, like, after you sort of get past the fact that that pickup was in there and you played it for a while, there really wasn't that big of a difference between those other two pickups that were in it that were original, and that being in the middle was not like, oh man, I go to this and this is like this is not as good, you know what I mean? It was a very good pickup for, as a replacement to throw in there. Would a 69 pickup have been more accurate? Probably, but we just didn't have a set at that time, so it was just like, well, let's just throw these in there. And it held its own for sure. And I'll tell you too, like, I mean, was it different? Yes. I mean, by the late 70s, I think like 76 maybe, they went to flat poles, which means that every pole piece was like exactly the same height, which there's some definite tone benefits to that sometimes. There's some stuff you get with like the G string being really loud, especially when you record clean, and if you play kind of like, I pick really hard, and I noticed that that's like a problem. I have to be very cautious, and like there's some things you can do from a mic placement standpoint, like if you put your mic on a 45 degree angle, you get less of that, but man, like really, like the Tex-Mex they are a very good all-around Strat set, and they're cheap. They're not expensive. They're $100 cheaper or whatever, $80 cheaper than the rest of the sets we're talking about. And if you just want a set that just sounds like a Strat, they're a really good way to go. I don't have a guitar with those in it right now. I think I have 2 more guitars in the works that I've just sort of been putting together just because I didn't really want to spend the money. But I probably just about have all the stuff to build 2 more guitars, and I would be tempted to put Tex-Mex in one of them just to have a guitar that is more of like a traditional, because all my other guitars have like a guitar that does this and a guitar that does that, and just to have a Strat that's just a Strat, and it doesn't have like a bunch of sort of like, it doesn't have a really huge low end neck pickup, or like, it doesn't really bright, or it doesn't clip off a bunch of low end and things like that. Like, I think that it would be good to have one guitar that's just sort of middle of the road. But those are your sets, and so we didn't really talk about the 54 set that much. I mean, I sort of used it as a comparison. I will say I had a guitar originally when I built the red guitar. That's the guitar that has the custom shop 69s in it. It had 54s, and it was like, I was like, I cannot. These pickups are bright and really punchy in the upper mids, and they're almost like, they're kind of more like a telly type of tone, like a telly bridge tone, and they just did not, especially at that time. I was using a different amplifier than I am now, and I had an amp that was an EL84 amp, so sort of more in the Vox territory, and they were just nasty sound. I mean, they were just so bright. Now, I mean, maybe that's what you want, you know what I mean? It depends. Like, you play a bunch of Tom Petty stuff, you know what I mean? And you're looking for that sort of jangle thing, where you're gonna, you're not gonna play with a ton of gain. You're gonna play with it like really pushed, and then you're gonna, you want like a bunch of brightness, and you're gonna maybe try to push the mids a little bit to try to, sort of do that almost Rickenbacker thing, maybe. But for me, it was like, this is too much. It was like rip your head off bright.